Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here, and thanks for giving us your time today. In case you're new here, you can become a subscriber at goodvirtualreality.com. Many episodes of this podcast head out over email first to paid subscribers before publishing everywhere. Thank you to my founding members, paid subscribers, sponsors, and the donations I've received supporting the production of this independent journalism. Today I'm joined by Grant Hinkson. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on?
Hi, Ian. First, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and share with you about these projects. I'm Grant Hinkson. I am the creator of Connectome. Connectome is an immersive art experience that is launching imminently on the Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah, immersive art experience. So I appreciate your word choice there, not a game. I didn't hear you describe it as a game, even though it shares some mechanics with games. I know you had previously released this for other systems, I believe the Quest, right?
That's right.
And so I went in there in Apple Vision Pro. I've got to describe just feeling a little mesmerized, feeling transported in a really calming way. I enjoy the colors, just giving me a nice, relaxed vibe.
Mhm.
And then I love this. There was like this subtle discovery. You're doing some really interesting things with the eye tracking inside the Apple Vision Pro that I haven't experienced before. And so I just found myself on my first boot up of your experience, spending a good 45 minutes fully immersed, going from these rooms and feeling this subtle bit of discovery that I was
Mhm.
being unlocked with from your experience. The only context I had before I went into this was connect the dots. And
Right.
I'm like, why would you want to connect the dots in VR? That
Yeah.
doesn't sound very fun. And then I
Right.
just, I led with my feelings that I had here, the things you actually delivered. But like, I need to close that gap for someone out there who's like, this is connect the dots in VR? What? That doesn't sound very fun.
Sure. So, yeah, this is actually quite hard to describe. I'm going to do my best. I did start with this idea. What if there were floating points in space? Playing with hand tracking at the time and now eye tracking for Apple Vision Pro. What if there were just floating points of hidden objects floating in space? And the way you reveal them is by scanning the space with your hand or looking with your eye. And then there's some visual reaction that you found something. And then just by a simple pinch, you reveal it. So like that's the moment of discovery. And it was anchored to this familiar childhood game of connect the dots. Like everybody gets that idea, oh, there are points and we connect them and something is then created. But it was brought to immersion, brought to 3D space. And that's where that term connect the dots comes in. It's trying to create that connection to childhood familiarity. But really, it's just an interaction pattern. And once you realize that you can, I call it hydrate points in front of you or drag a point. It becomes a progress bar, a core interaction that allows you to control other elements. So if I'm dragging a point from its origin to its destination, I can track that progress. And then using that progress, I can change the scale of objects around you. You can change the color of those objects. You can initiate other actions within the space. So yes, it uses that expression, connect the dots, but it's not traditional connect the dots.
Got it. And so there was one in particular, and I'm almost worried to say this as a spoiler, but I guess it's
Sure.
not going to be a spoiler. But there was a specific moment where I revealed a whale. I
Yeah.
revealed a whale using this interaction that you're describing. And it's burned into my memory here. I'm bringing it
Yeah.
up with you now. But this moment of like, well, that's a whale
Mhm.
is delightful. And it's funny to like think of this, flying whales are the go-to metaphor for augmented reality, virtual reality, take your pick of what term you're using. But you genuinely got that reaction out of me that all these science fiction depictions of this
Yeah.
thing got out of me. And yeah, you're just revealing an invisible object floating in front of you by sort of scanning the scene for these points. We're going to have both technical listeners here who understand Apple Vision Pro development. You're going to have also some less technical listeners here that are perhaps just Apple Vision Pro users. And you're going to have a whole bunch of people that don't have an Apple Vision Pro and haven't had eye tracking or that experience. But one thing that has been a recurring complaint or discussion about the Apple Vision Pro interface is that it actually can be fairly exhausting
Hmm.
to interact with an environment using only your eyes. Was that something you had to work through, and how did you solve for it, if so?
When I start with an idea, we all have many ideas, and you say, "Oh, that would be so cool. Oh, that would be so cool if." You have to start by validating, is that actually cool? Does it actually feel good, or does it feel like work? And even this particular experience that you're describing where you're revealing the whale has many points. Like, it's a more complicated geometry than a cube. A cube has just 8 points that you're clicking to bring into existence, and the whale has many more. If the density of the model is too high, it starts to feel like work. If there are too few points, you lose that moment of reveal and excitement of discovery. There is really like a subjective call that I have to make. It's like, okay, I think this is too complicated. I think this is not complicated enough. And you watch people play as well. I've had people say, oh, that felt like too much work. And in the latest build, when an underlying object has more points than a certain number, a single click will reveal 3 points, for example. So you sort of accelerate the unraveling of the object, so to speak. So that is a very real concern, because when you're trying to create something that feels like play and it's delightful, the minute it crosses over into feeling like work, then as a designer or creator, that's the failure point.
Really, really useful. Explain to me this idea of revealing the points, because it almost feels like you've reversed the interaction paradigm a little bit, where I don't know where I'm supposed to
Mm.
interact, and I
Yeah.
have to find it. And normally it's like the opposite, I think, of that, right? Like you're clearly giving signposts around you that you can interact with me here is
Yeah.
the way of normally thinking about it. So how did you arrive at this, and why does it work?
Well, this is a delicate balance, isn't it? Where you want somebody to be in a space. And well, if you think about a museum exhibit, you have physical objects, levers and switches, and we sort of instinctively know just by the physical design of those objects how to interact with them. Oh, that's a lever that moves up and down, or that's a switch, I push it up and down. When you're in a virtual environment, you see a lot of objects in like traditional VR games that are just physical representations of the things in the real world, right? Oh, that is a lever. I get it. I'm using hands. I push it up. I pull it down, and the lights go on and off. In Connectome, these rooms are built with primitive geometries. So we're literally drawing lines and points, and it's a very minimalist style. So how do, the question is, how do you know what you can interact with? That's where you started. So in the very beginning of the experience, we start just by connecting a single point. And, it basically says pinch and drag and release. And that's the only thing you can do. You just move your hand and it attaches, or you're scanning with your eye and you see a hover state appear and you pinch. So if you're coming to this from Vision OS, you already you've been taught to look and to pinch. So that's the foundation upon which you build. You expect anyone entering into your experience to look and pinch. Foundation, right? So you build on that foundation, you have a point, you look at it, it hovers, and the text in front of you says drag. And as you drag, you see it get to a point, and a ring, as you approach it, subtly appears. You realize, oh, cause and effect. And then I get close enough, and it pulls it in like a little magnet, snaps. The next step is teaching somebody to pinch to reveal. So I could just have a cube completely void in space, but instead I reveal the first point of that cube. So you see the lines emitting from that single vertex. And then if you follow the line with your eye, you get to the next corner of the cube. And so by starting with this very simple geometry, you're teaching somebody subtly to follow lines with their eye. And then as they get to that point, you get a hover state and you click and you reveal. So it's really just building on these very basic things. And once you know those two things, you're successful in this game. I see a
Mm.
point, I try to hover and drag. I step into a room with an object to reveal, and at least one of those vertices is revealed to me, and I can follow the line to the next one, and so on and so forth.
And repeatedly, what I encountered was this sort of like little moment of surprise where it's like,
Mm,
"Oh, it's not where the end of this line is not where I expect it to be. It's a little bit
right.
further. Oh, this
Yeah.
object is not what I expected it to be. It's actually there's a tail here, there's an
Mm-hmm.
ear here, there's something different here than I really imagined it to be. And I made that little discovery one, dot, one line at a time.
Right.
Really, really cool. I began here by describing 45 minutes to an hour. And the reason that's important to me to kind of begin is that's longer than I spend with almost
Mm,
any Apple Vision Pro experience or any Apple
right.
Vision Pro app. And most, Apple Apple's Vision OS operating system is such a peculiar new thing. Most apps are non-starters for me if they don't use the volumetric shared space, if they don't share their space with other apps,
Right.
because the lift for taking over my entire experience is so high and keeping me from all of my other apps. It's like going full screen on a traditional
Yeah.
screen. For the people who aren't familiar with this idea, they call it full space, where
Mm-hmm.
the app takes over your entire experience. Well, your app does that. It takes over my entire experience. And even though you're showing me my hands in front of me, I would call this a VR experience. And even
Yeah.
though Apple doesn't, use that terminology,
Sure.
this is 100% a VR experience to me on Apple's device. And it, it's one of the few that I've spent that amount of time in a single sitting, my first sitting,
Wow.
just exploring. And so that's a significant moment. That's why I wanted to get to this conversation with you and go over like why that is and how hard it's going to be to find an audience here for something, right? I assume this podcast should go out when this product is available to get on the storefront. You're putting a piece of art out there into the world that is unusual. It's different, and you're putting on a storefront that it ultimately has been like built for free to play ad driven
Yeah.
games.
Totally.
And now you're trying to get an immersive experience that takes over all of a person's senses for, like I said, 45 minutes to an hour plus. And it's like, you've got to hope and pray that someone at Apple is going to be as inspired as I have been or you have been in designing this product to give it a little push and let other people know that this is something interesting and beautiful. So, I just wanted to say all that. And let me step back here a minute and go, first off, what were some of your inspirations for this specific project, or what was your path to this specific project?
Sure. And first, thank you for saying that. That is my hope, is that people, certainly at Apple, others like yourself, experience this and go, "Oh, wow, this is different. This is special. I want to share it." When you create art, because I do think this is art. I mean, video game creation itself is an art form. You put it into the world and you don't know how it's going to be responded to. But as a creator, as an artist, you feel compelled to do so. Like that's the difference between design and art. And that could be like a completely different conversation I won't go down. But when you are creating something from your core of self and you're compelled to do so, you put it out there and it's then beyond your control. So you asked me, where did this start? What were the origins? What was my inspiration? I've been creating art with code for a long time. And in 2018, I built my first hanging wall plotter. And this is basically like a drawing robot. I was really compelled to that physical version of a wall plotter where you have these two motors, top left, top right, and a pen hanging in the middle, creates this triangle. And then the brain behind it draws SVGs for you. And so I was creating artwork in processing. Processing is a programming language used by visual artists. And so I created something that I called the Hydra. It was really like this grid-based layout connected with Bezier curves. And over, several years, I just sort of experimented with that particular layout. I was creating grid-based art. And when I knew that I wanted to create something immersive, I started with what I knew. And so step one was bringing the Hydra to life in Unity. And that was a forcing function to find a drawing library. I ended up using Shapes, which is a popular drawing library. It's really great in Unity. It helped me understand motion and just like the environment of Unity to bring some of these code-based art concepts to life. And I kind of just kept pulling the thread saying like, we go back to that earlier question between work and play. Some of the work I was doing was using concentric objects, and you'll see those in Connectome now, like the concentric triangles. But I was playing with pass-through and just projecting these big giant geometries in front of me, and then I would have handles that you could push, and it would push these concentric triangles out in space in front of you to create this sense of depth. It's like, oh, this is interesting. So it really came from a place of play and discovery, anchored in the art I was already creating, just trying to answer that question: what's interesting? What's playful? And ultimately, it became immersive. And, I've always been drawn to thinking about amusement park design, things like rides at Disney, and those are all controlled environments. And you're setting a mood with color, with sound, with music, and then, of course, with interaction patterns. So in order to ultimately guide and create these experiences that result in you saying those words that you started with, discovery, calm, all of those generative explorations manifested in this immersive environment, so that I could control a flow, and I could control pace, and I could guide your attention and your direction. And ultimately, it became this room by room by room thing. And I thought of each room almost as a different set that you could enter into and discover something new. And that gave me the flexibility to play with different interaction patterns, where in one room you might reveal those whales, and in another room you might control the scale of objects with the same dragging of a line.
So, what's the difference on the Quest edition of this? After I've experienced the Vision Pro version of this,
Uh-huh.
will I be disappointed with the Quest version?
Hmm.
Explain to me the difference in
Sure.
interaction and perhaps even resolution, because that is such a significant aspect.
Yeah, let's start with the difference. The core difference is on the Quest 3, and this also works on the Quest 2. You're using hand tracking. On the Vision Pro, you're using eye tracking. So if you go to the Quest, it would probably feel pretty natural to you, but rather than allowing your arms to just sort of rest at your waist and click, you're going to be raising your hands, and you're going to scan the space with your hands. I think it's still delightful, but it's discovery using a different sense. You're scanning with your hands instead of looking with your eyes. And both of those things can feel really intuitive and magical. But I have to say, like, being able to do it with eye tracking really feels good. It felt so great. Being able to bring that to life is like, oh man, this reduces the friction, because I've demoed Connectome at art events, at different indie games events, AWE last year. And at a lot of those events, especially the art galleries, I'm demoing to people who are wearing a headset for the very first time. And I would have to train them how to position their hand. The friction of looking at something and clicking is lower than knowing how to position the palm of your hand and understand that there's a vector coming out of the middle of it, and that's what is creating the attach point. Anybody else who spends any amount of time in VR, they're just going to put the headset on and go, oh yeah, I get this. This is great. And that has been my experience. Watching people who are either fellow creators or content creators or just people in VR, they get the hand tracking, and that friction is pretty low. Someone starting from zero, it's a little bit higher, and there's a bit of a learning curve. But yeah, the eye tracking, it even removes that friction further.
If you are a developer in the space and you do have access to Vision Pro and a Quest 3, this project ends up being a really, really helpful exploration of the differences between hand tracking and eye tracking then. So you can go in and experience what's basically the same content, but
That's right.
using these two dramatically different interaction paradigms, and you can model for yourself whatever you want to create in this space. You can compare it to how those two interactions work in this space and work back from there to how you might want to implement it. All right, so I want to ask you those two questions that I typically ask all my guests on this podcast. How did you end up building for headsets in the first place? What was your first experience with VR?
I still remember where I was when I put a VR headset on for the first time. And I was working at Amazon. I was in the devices design group, and a good friend of mine who had actually been at HTC and worked on the Vive. And this was before even Oculus Go had been released. So it was a tethered headset, And I probably tried what many people experience for the first time, and it was tilt brush. But I was just standing against the windows of the Seattle skyline in the backdrop, and I put the headset on and started painting in virtual space, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I mean, that really did hook me. And then shortly thereafter, the Go came out. From there, I was leading a design prototyping team. Over subsequent years, we would use VR to prototype smart home experiences, really just kind of like speculative design type work. But I was not the one hands-on at that point as the VR creator. I just understood the benefit of it to validate some, spatial design ideas before you then build the physical thing to prove it out.
So I can almost draw a line here between
Mm.
Tilt Brush and what you've built here. You can imagine
Oh
it
yeah.
leading to some of this inspiration that you've arrived at here. The other question that I ask all my guests is, can you think of a favorite moment of presence inside of a headset? So you've given me your first, which was that
Right.
Tilt Brush and where you were, but tell me about a moment where you just felt there and to the best degree.
Yeah. I mean, over the years, of course, I've played many different things, but the one that stands out, and this may sound funny, it was the first run onboarding flow that I think shipped with the Quest 2. And it wasn't a game. You just stepped into this black void. And again, you can maybe even see some threads from that to what I created. It was like this vaporwave style artwork. And there were objects on a table. I could pick up a paper airplane and throw it. And I remember that moment when I threw the paper airplane and it defied gravity and it just kept going. And that was like this unlock moment for me. I was like, right, we can create in here and not be bound by the physical world. And a lot of design and creation is applying real world physics to things. But that's just a constraint we put on ourselves. That specific experience just like unlocked for me the possibility of creativity in VR. And I'll never forget that moment.
I love it. Well, let's go back to your project. And is there anything else you want people to understand about what you've built?
I want people to approach this with an open mind and understand it's not necessarily a game, but a place to calm down. And like you with those whales, like the whales is a favorite moment for me. And why it's a favorite moment is it evokes that moment of discovery and joy and surprise. And that is my hope, is that if you experience Connectome, you give yourself the space to get in that mindset of, I'm just here to see what is here and where will it lead me, and not be in a rush. Please don't rush. When you allow yourself to slow down and complete a line or an object, and then these big giant panels sort of move in around you, just like be present in that moment. Just go, oh wow, this is big. I'm small. I love getting to play with scale like that. That is something that is unique to creating for immersive, is that you can make somebody feel like they are in the tiniest box and really constricted, or in the vastness of space. And you can do that at the snap of a finger, and that really plays with the senses. And I try not to whiplash you, but from room to room, I do try to play with that sense of I'm in a constricted hallway and now I'm in this chamber.
Wow, I love that. Have you ever played Titans of Space? Have you ever experienced that one?
I have not.
So I'd recommend go look that up if you're listening to this. Titans of Space is one of my certified good VR projects that's labeled on my website now as sort of a tentpole project. But I can definitely point to that one. Oculus was a local company to me in
Mm,
2012, and I was at the Orange County Register reporting on them and got an early demo of just some game environment that was letting me look around inside of it. And that was great and it's memorable. The one that sticks with me again, year after year after year, is this Titans of Space experience. And what it is, the first moments of opening it after you do the opening menu and select all your choices is you're just floating in a spaceship and the earth is floating in front of you at like beach ball size, I guess much
huh,
larger than a beach ball. But then the moon is floating around it at beach ball size.
okay.
And you're seeing these two things that scale to each other. So the moon is orbiting
Right.
the earth and they're each 1 millionth smaller than they actually
Right.
are. And you get an instant sense of just what the size relationship is between these two
Right.
objects because of the way they're represented. But the moment you turn your head to the right, you see the sun. And you realize just how brain-breakingly large the sun is in
Right.
comparison to these two objects that are basically everything we see. And so within about 30 seconds of this experience beginning, you have used your human sense of scale to understand the scale of the universe, the scale of our solar
Right.
system, just how big that ball of fire is in our sky. And it's so far away. We have eclipses here that, that's the only
Yes.
way we ever experience this. We
Like,
can't really process how darn big the sun is because it's so darn far away. Well,
right.
here's this app that instantly provides that for you. So, in the same way that I think of Titans of Space all the darn time, and I will keep
Hmm.
bringing it up on this podcast over and
Right.
over and over again, because these projects that inspire us, that give us these moments of discovery and exploration, they require fans. They
Hmm.
require people to amplify and
Yeah.
point other people to their work. The philosophy of my site and what I'm doing with my work is that good VR is discovered. And then once you make a discovery, you have to put a marker on a map and let other people find that marker, sort of like a pin on a map, and point people to this good VR. And the platforms give us these spaces for review.
Right.
And not everyone has the right words to describe these things, and people are really price sensitive. Some people are really price sensitive. Some people
Yeah.
had no money to spend on anything this month,
Right.
and other people are not so much, right? They're just happy to fork over this money for, I always think of Field of Dreams, right? They're going to hand over those $10 without even thinking
Yeah.
about it.
Right.
And so, like, it's so important that we call out these projects again and again and again that inspire us. And I got to recommend to you to go out and check out Titans of Space on your Quest. And if you like it, give it a review and repeat that to other people. And I'm going to recommend people go check this out on Apple Vision Pro, Connectome. And what a beautiful project. And I can't wait to get to the end of it at some point. I only got through the first sort of segment of rooms, and I understand there's a couple more segments there, and I could end up, I think, probably a couple hours of playtime to explore all the rooms would be my guess on what the playtime is here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I had an early playtester who said, "Hey, I spent 3 evenings with it before I completed it." I think if you sat down and, earlier you asked me what do I want people to do? I said, "Slow down." If you go through it really fast, you could probably be finished with it in an hour, hour and a half, maybe faster. But if you take your time and really soak it up, you could spend couple of hours probably. Like, I just want to say I appreciate your approach and how you think about this and how important it is to find those advocates for what we've created. If you like something, like, tell people, because there is so much content out there. It's hard to be found. And Ian, I will just say I appreciate you being available to me. Like, I reached out to a mutual contact of ours asking if he could put me in touch with you. And he said, "I'll do one better." Ian said to give you his mobile number. And that's how we actually engaged with each other via text
Yeah,
message.
I love it. Yeah,
And
no,
it was just like, I felt so supported from the very beginning of my engagement with you. And so I just want you to know that I appreciate it, and it's seen and it means something.
I appreciate that. It's my secret sauce here. You're going to get me philosophical here for a few minutes before we end this podcast here, but ultimately, I have two phones and I pay for a service on two phones. And the reason I do that is an acknowledgement that I need to put VR away sometimes. I believe VR is the ultimate medium. It's the medium to end all mediums. It will consume all other mediums. Every other medium is accessible through it. I have this long term view that 200 years from now, it is ultimately all computers are these types of computers. So, like, that means that it occupies my brain nearly 24/7. I have to take control of my thinking to put it away for a little while. My answer to that over the last few years is just to put the phone away. That is this device that I use to think and connect with all of these people 24/7 at any hour. I'm not the only one that does this in various respects, right? You've got your work phone, you've got your personal phone. It's a pretty common thing these days. By doing this myself, it's revealed a whole host of situations about friction points in
Hmm.
headsets. By the time this publishes, I hopefully will have received the Clicks keyboard to MagSafe snap onto the back of my phone. So, right now, as we're speaking here, the iPhone is hanging from my chest in a shoulder strap. And soon enough, there's going to be a physical keyboard snapped to the back of it. And that physical keyboard will have Bluetooth buttons on it that I can
Hmm.
press to switch it to be the physical keyboard for my VR headset. So, like, at any moment's notice, when I'm in an experience and a text message comes up, instead of doing eye typing, I should be able to just pull my phone up from my chest and start typing on the physical keyboard that's sitting there.
That's great.
But, like, that's it's nerdy,
Sure.
it's bizarre. People are gonna look at this and go, "How absurd can you be?" But let me go to like, your appreciation is exactly what I'm going for in doing this. There's people in New Zealand that I wanna connect with. The example being, there's a guy out there who modeled a T-Rex skull in a 3D modeling program and then printed it out piece by piece on a 3D printer and assembled it
Wow.
into a, like, I can't remember if it was 1-to-1 scale, but it's a
Oh my goodness.
large, a
That's a
really, really
lot of
large.
printing.
Yeah.
That's a lot of that's
I never
patience.
asked him how much money he spent on that
Sure, on filament.
the yeah, on the filament. But, like, here's this guy who's just I'm looking around on the internet, and he's got a photo of himself standing next to his giant T-Rex skull that he modeled in VR, and
Okay.
he's a digger in New Zealand who, in his free time, is modeling a T-Rex out in VR, and, like, to connect with that person, I
Yeah,
am at opposite time zones on the planet. In
right.
order to get in connection with that person, I have to, like, be available at, like, 10 PM my time in
Mhm.
America to reach them during their daytime in New Zealand. And again, I find that the VR enthusiasts, the artists who really believe in this medium in the way that I have, they're in every hole around the world, in every time
Yeah,
zone, and I
totally.
have to make myself available in this way. So, like, if I don't have this phone that's hanging off my body, I will not be able to receive that text message from the New Zealander at 10:30 PM when
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to bed to schedule the thing for the next day. And yeah, it's my superpower here, being able to kind of make myself that available to connect to people. But also the flip side of that is I have to have a second phone to just put it away for once in a while and not connect with people. But
Yeah.
also the other realization there is that phones are never leaving us. Even when we're in VR, we need our phones
We still need
to
it.
be
Yeah,
able
we don't have a
to connect.
replacement yet.
Yeah.
I love that story. See, we are all designing all the time. You're designing to meet a need. This phone hanging around your neck, this
Mm.
keyboard attachment, this person in New Zealand who is compelled to create in VR this tool that he has and then print it. It's like this is our nature, is to make and to create and share. And when we have spare time, that's what we're doing, creating.
Well, I love it, and it's also this job can be lonely when you're
Mm,
this obsessed with the idea of what you can do. You spend 10 or 20 hours alone in a room in a headset, alone in a headset, just
right.
building. You know, it can be hard to reach these people that are spread out, and they're out there,
Yeah.
but they're just spread out over like light years away almost,
Hmm.
and you've got to reach out and find them. So I appreciate you reaching out to me. If you have other artists who inspire you in the way that you've inspired me, feel free to pass along my phone number to them so that they can reach me in the same way. So thank you
Okay.
so much for the time, Grant. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
I'll end by saying thank you. I'm excited about this project. You being excited, it feels great. I appreciate this opportunity to share more. And if you're listening to this, you have an Apple Vision Pro, please try it out.
Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful project and wonderful little art piece and all those things that I started off on this conversation. I hope others experience the same thing. Calm and mesmerizing and just a little bit of focus in a
Yeah.
busy world you can get with this thing. So thank you so much for the time, Grant. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ian.